Okay everybody, so it's done, so let's talk some numbers. I'm going to try and walk through the whole build here in sections and talk about what I had to get and what I paid for it. I might have left out a few smaller things, especially late, like the trim work and the update from a factory door to my homemade doors, but other than that, I think it should be a pretty accurate list, so let's take a look. 1, 2, 3, jump.
Hi, I'm Brian.
Alright, so I'll start each of these sections with a screenshot of my materials list in case you want to pause on that. But for the floor, we're starting with treated 4x4s for the skids and their cross members between them. A couple of those skids were spliced together to make them longer with 2x4s also treated, and the skids were connected by those cross members with 4x4 joist hangers. Next would be the floor joists themselves, which were 2x8s, and those were connected with 2x8 joist hangers. Then finally the subfloor itself was 3/4 inch plywood on top of all that and a coat of stain to protect it. So after the flooring, I'll have to jump around a little bit based on the way things went together, like framing up the walls and then moving on to the roof before coming back to finish up the walls. So I think what I'll do is just throw some timestamps down in the description of the video in case you want to jump to those screenshots of materials to follow along with what I'm saying. But for the start of the walls at least, all you really need to know is that all the wall framing was done with 2x4 material, with the exception of the headers over the doors and windows, and those were 2x6 material. The only other thing really involved here, as you see me nailing this all together, is a bunch of 2-inch ring shank nails that I used in my pneumatic nailer. So after framing up the walls, I moved on to the roof to add a little stability to everything and hopefully provide us some protection from any rains we might get from this point on. But the roof framing is really just a lot of 2x8 material for the rafters and all of the blocking in between those rafters and the fascia on the front and the back. And that's all connected to the walls with a couple of different rafter ties, depending on whether it was an end rafter or not. You had to treat those a little bit special as far as hanging them. But after the rafters comes a layer of 1/2-inch plywood for sheathing, and that plywood also required some clips, some sheathing panel clips to provide some gaps for expansion and contraction. And then after the plywood was on, there was a layer of roofing paper, which we used a synthetic material that came in rolls. It was actually recommended by the metal roofing manufacturer that we'll talk about next. But that roofing paper was put on using some special cap nails that we actually also used for the house wrap later on. So with the roof on and some water protection on it, I was able to order my metal roofing, and while I wait for that, I can go back to the walls and put on a bunch of 1/2-inch OSB sheathing, and that's going to add a little bit of lateral stability, kind of some shear force to those walls. And I put that on with a bunch of the 2-inch ring shank nails that I mentioned earlier with the pneumatic nailer. So that was just a lot of those panels put on there. And of course, after I get those panels up, I've got to cut out for the windows and the door. And then following all the sheathing, it is time for the house wrap to go on. Don't ask me where I got it, it's a big secret. But that house wrap, it was fun to put on in a little bit of wind, not real fun job there. But that went on with a bunch of the cap nails actually that we used for the roofing paper as well. So we got kind of double duty out of those. Looks all right at the end, but it was kind of a bear to get on there in the wind. And to finish up the roof, it's just a bunch of long panels attached with some special roofing screws, a lot of special roofing screws that have little rubber washers on them to prevent moisture from getting in there. And you can see us putting in some foam inserts at the top and bottom to prevent bugs and critters getting in, and then finally a couple of trim pieces on the top and the sides. And next comes the windows. I had originally broken this out as windows and doors, but I made a late change to kind of replace a factory-made door with my own homemade doors. And I missed some of that cost here, but it didn't add a whole lot to the project. I used mostly things I already had, materials I already had, but there was some hardware that had to be added, but not too big of a cost. And for the windows, I just went with kind of the cheapest thing I could find around the size I wanted, and some peel and seal for the flashing. Pretty standard stuff. Now back to the walls one last time, with the exception of the final trim and paint. But for the finish on the walls, I just selected this LP SmartSide paneling. It's very similar to a T111, but I like the look and feel of this stuff a little better, so I chose that. Attached with, again, a bunch of the 2-inch ring shank nails in the pneumatic nailer. And took a little bit of finagling around doors and windows, but other than that, pretty similar job to putting the OSB sheathing on. Just another layer here, a finish layer going on. And finally, the doors. Like I said, I did change from my original design. I was going to use just a prefab door. I changed my mind to go with my own double doors, kind of homemade, which I'm really happy that I did now that it's done. It was a little extra work and maybe a little extra cost, but not too much. But I loved the look I got out of it and the functionality, so totally worth it. But I used most of the material I already had, with the exception of the hardware. It didn't really add a lot of cost in the grand scheme of things, so definitely happy with that decision. And as far as the cost goes, I think if you total up all of the screenshots that I've got, it comes to the neighborhood of about $3,500. And with some of the things that I missed and some of the changes that I made, that could go up maybe to around $4,000, but I think that's really good value for what I got out of this. So really pleased, under $4,000 for this whole thing, top to bottom. I was going to do the jump first.
Love on the rocks. All right.
It's videotaping.
Okay.
I just said I was going to do the jump first.
Oh, the jump. Okay. All right.
Okay.
Am I in it?
Are we putting our arms up in the air, or what do we do?
I was thinking like George Costanza.
All right, here we go. Come over here.
We'll do a couple, right?
So 1, 2, 3, then jump.
All right.
You ready?
Yeah. Ready?
1, 2, 3, jump.
Oh my gosh! My pants are falling.
All right.
All right. Ready?
1, 2, 3, jump.